Hi there. This week I only have time for a really quick video that I hope you'll find truly helpful. Now, it answers a question from Kelly who wanted to know how to measure your shoulder slope. Now, a quick Google search will really give you several options. You can trace your shoulder line onto a piece of paper taped to the wall, or of course, you can use an iPhone app to determine the degree of slant that you have on your body. Now, I personally haven't found these to be very accurate because you usually need a helper to work with you. So I rely on the sample fit assessment to tell me what the shoulder slope should be. Now, once you have a sample garment that fits your shoulder angle, you can record that information for future use. So today I'm going to show you how to measure the shoulder slope on a pattern so that you can use that information for future sewing projects. So what we have here is a Vogue pattern, and I've just pulled out the front and back shoulder pieces here so that we can determine what the shoulder slope is on this particular pattern. Now I want you to assume that this has already gone through at least one fitting stage and you've established that this particular shoulder angle is working for you, or that you have already altered it to fit your shoulder angle. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to show you how to measure the shoulder angle on the pattern. So the first thing that you want to do for sure is draw in your seam lines on the pattern along the shoulder line. You're also going to want to know where the seam line is on the neckline edge and the armhole edge. Now, once you have those lines drawn in on your pattern, what I want you to do is fold back the seam allowance, because what is important here is the angle of the seam line. So just fold those little sections back just like that. I'm just folding it at that 5/8 of an inch. And then what I want you to make sure that you have clearly marked is the neck point at the shoulder line. So what you need to know is the intersection of the neckline and shoulder seam line. So I'm just going to highlight those intersections in this little marker here. I know it might be difficult for you to see, but you're going to see how this all comes together in just a minute. You can also put a little dot at the shoulder point as well on the armhole side, because we are going to need both the front and back pieces to determine what our shoulder slope is. Next thing I want you to do is place the back one at the kind of on top of a piece of paper, because you're going to need some kind of paper beneath to be able to draw in the information. So just place your back pattern piece in front of you, and then what I want you to do is take your front pattern piece, flip it as if you're going to sew the right sides together, and then what I want you to do is stack up those two neck points together. So just stacking up the seam lines of the neckline and shoulder seam line. Now, definitely it's a good idea to do a little tiny pin here, because you want to be able to pivot your pattern. Because what's important now is that when you lay up your pattern, what you're going to do is pivot it until your two grain lines that you have on your pattern pieces are parallel to each other. So what you're going to see here, what I've already prepared, is the grain line of the back pattern piece here. What I've done is extended it even further so that it's a really long grain line, and I've done the same to the front pattern piece as well. So you can see I've extended the grain line. And now what I want to do is pivot from this neck point here at the shoulder line until my two pieces have the grain lines sitting parallel to each other. Now what you're going to do is then of course measure to make sure that that distance is equal all the way along the grain line. So I like to take my grid ruler and place it along the grain line of the front piece here. And then you probably can't see this because I know it's difficult to see through, but what I'm going to do is pivot my front piece until my two green lines are parallel to each other. Okay, so you can see my ruler is moving along with the front pattern piece, always going back to double check. Again, it's really important that you do level out these grain lines, making sure that they are parallel to each other. Okay, so now those two grain lines are parallel to each other. I'm just going to secure my front pattern piece onto my back pattern piece here so that they don't move. Okay, so now that we have our fronts and back all lined up, again, we are stacked right here at the neck point and our grain lines are parallel to each other. So our front grain line and our back grain line are parallel to each other. Now you're going to notice here that there is a difference between the back shoulder slope and the front shoulder slope. Now this is normal because we have extra length to go over our shoulder blade on the back part of the garment, and we don't have that at the front. So that's why there's these different slopes. So what you need to do to find the true shoulder slope of the pattern is to find the midpoint between these 2 points. This will be the average of where that seam is actually going to land on your arm. So our first step then is to find the midpoint between these 2 points right here. So these are the points right at the end of the shoulder line. And all you're going to do for that is, by all means, just measure the distance, and I've got about 5/8 of an inch here. There's a 5/8 inch difference, which means that my midpoint is going to be at approximately this level. Okay, so I've just drawn a little dot there for you. Okay, so at this point, what I want you to do is sort of make sure that your pattern pieces aren't going to be moving around. So I'm just going to put some weights down on this pattern piece so that they don't shift on you. Again, I've got them pinned together, but just make sure that they don't move on you. And the next thing I want you to do is just with some temporary tape, you can tape down your back shoulder line here. Now, once you have that, what you want to do is extend your grain line a little bit further up so that make sure that you can actually see it, because you're going to need to use your ruler, your grid ruler, to determine what the angle is going to be. So now what we're going to do is use that grain line that I've extended up here onto this extra piece of paper that I have under here, and I'm going to line up the grid of my ruler here to that grain line and intersect it with this neckline point at the neckline side of the shoulder line. And then I'm just going to draw a line that is perpendicular to that grain line. And then you're going to measure from this horizontal line that you created there to this midpoint between the 2 shoulder points here. And if I measure that, I'm going to see that the shoulder angle on this pattern is just slightly over 1 5/8. Now, considering that my dot's pretty big, it's probably 1 5/8. So again, measuring this distance here. So the shoulder slope on this pattern is 1 5/8 of an inch. Now, once you have that number, you can then do this experiment on all your future patterns. And this is going to allow you to make adjustments if you need to. If you're an experienced sewer, you know that choosing what to sew is pretty easy. Putting it together in terms of a wardrobe is a little bit more difficult, but the most challenging part of sewing for yourself is understanding how to make a pattern fit you. If you've been struggling with that, I have a free guide that might help you. It's called the Perfect Fit Guide, and it walks you through the fitting process one step at a time, from taking your body measurements to assessing your sample for fit. You'll find a link to the guide somewhere on this page. Thanks for watching. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.